Well, I'm now joined by Denis Mariali, who is the Chief Digital Officer at LVMH Group. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Your group is huge, vast, in lots of different regions around the world and lots of different categories. What's the challenge for you at the moment in terms of the things that are possible in terms of the digital world versus the realities of digital within a retailing organisation?
So I think that I've joined Guerlain. So I'm working for one of the house of the group, LVMH Group. My role is to accelerate this digital transformation. I think that the main stakes we have currently is probably to make people understand that digital bring a lot of opportunities and the value to better interact with consumers. So it's much more about a change management, I would say, culture, which is important for us to accelerate, rather than just technical project or digital project. So it's to spend the right time with all the people to be sure that the transformation will embark all the employees. So that's the main stake.
The houses that you have under your stable, I suppose, are synonymous with fantastic creative directors.
Yeah.
How do those creative directors view digital as a threat or an opportunity?
At the very beginning, to be fully honest with you, it was I had some hard time to work with the team, because you are at the frontier between the high demanding, very around perfection of everything, and when it comes to digital, it's much more about test and learn. It's make the project live, and then you will have all the time and the ability to improve it. So it's I would say it's confrontation of two very different culture, and I would say that it's also a confrontation between the culture of the print, the beautiful print, the TV spot, etc. to social networks with the necessity to produce ongoing content every day on all the touch points, So there is a requirement of volume. So the stake is to associate the volume of the content, which all the countries, all the brands are asking for, with the quality. So that's the main challenge we are facing.
And what is the tension there? I mean, is it impossible to do volume at quality?
I think that you had to organize yourself to be able to do so. So we are building an internal factory, internal studio to accelerate and to be much more independent. But obviously, we're working also with external partners. But then again, it's a question of digital upskilling. It's about making people understand why it is so important. It's making all these artistic directors understand that if you wait and you make this picture content so beautiful, so perfect, it's gonna take some long time, and at the end, none of our countries will use it. Okay, because countries are then working with retailers who need this content 4 or 5 months before everybody. So we had to respect this timing challenge, and so we had a regular meeting, daily meeting to validate together the content we're going to produce, because at the end it's a question of brand equity and brand consistency.
Now, are there any things that digital allows you to do that are actually impossible to do beforehand? Has that actually liberated the organisation, the creativity of the organisation, to think about doing things in a very different way?
I think that the good thing, I will say, it's about consumer centricity. The fact that nowadays the consumer owns the power. The consumer is choosing the prescriptors. So, if 10 years ago, we were listening to the company's speech, but now we prefer to listen to an influencer, to another customer ambassador, etc. So they are choosing the one they would like to listen to and to follow. So I think that in that context, it brings a lot of power to the consumer, and the company had to organize itself in a much more client-centric, culture, to be sure not to miss this interaction with consumer.
And again, is there tension in that? your fashion houses are very known for choosing who their endorser, celebrity, the face of the brand, the face of this season's collection is going to be. And yet we now have really important key influencers who almost emerge from nowhere, who can have a great influence on the brand being successful or not. And you can't choose them. They emerge.
So
And you have to work with them.
Yeah, so we developed a department within Gala digital team, which is in charge of monitoring, tracking all these new influencers, and then interact with them, because we know that it is as important to work with the big celebrities, the big influencer, and rather than also all these small and micro influencers. So we are working with all the category influencer, and now we are also working on building this best customer ambassador community, because at the end, the best prescriptor you could have is your customer. It's not the influencer, it's the customer. So it's to be able to track them and to build this community and to animate this community.
What have you learned in terms of best practices from this sort of new emergence of influencers around the world?
I think that being authentic is the strong one. To be sure that, because at the end, it's a consumer are looking for transparency and authenticity. So if you try to manipulate, to use new prescriptors to push product, it's much more about storytelling. It's much more about consumer experience. It's much more about emotion. Consumers are looking for emotion right now. So it's your ability to create emotion, integrating this new customer experience that develop engagement with your consumer.
And in the context of all of that, how important is coming back to the core principles of the integrity and the story of each of the individual brands themselves?
I would say that when you're working on an engagement and advocacy strategy, the best thing is very simple. It's probably to take a white paper and a pen and to write what you consider as a parity zone with all your competitors and your differentiation zone. And then just focus on your differentiation zone. Saying that for your consumer, it has to be obvious that the differences are this asset. For Gala, it's a question of sustainability, it's a patrimony, So we have a lot of things to say. So it's much more about, communicate on your differentiators.
Now, I think it's fair to say the luxury brands have been the slowest of the retailers to embrace transactional e-commerce. Is that something that you see that pace will increase over time, or will there always be a reluctance to sell directly to the customer via an e-channel?
I think that the winning strategy, and all the industry of luxury, I completely understand that, is to develop this direct omni-channel strategy. So moving direct with the e-commerce and with your own retail.
And in that world, what do you think the role of the physical store is still going to be?
It's huge. It's really huge. So once you've understand the importance of having a direct retail and this omni-channel, then it gives you the ability to collect data, and we know that data is the new oil for companies. So it gives you the ability to collect, to provide very relevant interaction, and to be able to provide this very innovative, differentiate consumer experience. So if it is your own shop, then you have the ability to choose the experience you would like to deliver. So it's a good way to test things. So we are using our direct shop, our boutiques, to test a lot of innovation when it comes to a consumer experience before thinking about rolling out. So it's a good way to test and learn and to capitalize of all your omni-channel strategy in a data collection approach.
Your title is a Chief Digital Officer. There are lots of Chief Digital Officers around the world for different organisations. Would you view success in, 5 years' time, 6 years' time, when the role of a Chief Digital Officer won't be needed because everything will be digital?
Yeah. So I think always a short-term, short-term job. So if you do
I'm
well
not trying to
your
wish
job,
your time away.
no, but I will say that I mean a good CDO is probably in the company for 3 or 4 years, and then if he or she had accelerated digital transformation, then it's up to everybody to become a CDO at each role within the organization, in marketing, in HR, in sales, in operation. So it's much more about education, about change management, about make people think out of the box, use these new ways of working, which are the test and learn, the agility, the co-design, the co-creation with the consumer when you develop something to be sure that you will meet customer expectations. So it's much more about ways of working, mindset to accept that, it's not because the consumer is buying online that sales director say, okay, you took my customer. No, customer is buying online, offline, in omni-channel world. So it's much more about education. And then 3 or 4 years after, I mean, all people are supposed to be the CDO at their level.
So finally, how would you summarize in a word, or maybe I'll give you 2 words, the times that we're living in today from a retail perspective?
To be honest with you, I'm afraid of that, probably because I have two children, and I look at the way they interact with our world, the time they spend on their mobile phone to manage everything, to manage their friends, to manage all your leisure, etc. So their leisure. So it's quite. I mean, you could be afraid of that. Then I think that the good thing is that it brings us the requirement of being much more consumer-centric. So at the end, I think it's a winning strategy because, we spend so many times to be product-oriented, brand-oriented, and now nowadays we had to be consumer-centric because consumer had the power. So if you like to survive in the world where you had to disrupt or to being disrupted, then you had to integrate that in your culture, in your strategy, and to be sure that you are aligned with your consumer expectation and you create value for the consumer. And also for when we've seen all these touch point, the multiplication of touch point create a lot of opportunities for companies to collect data. And the consumer accept that. They accept that once you're able to use this data to be much more relevant in their interaction with them. So I think it's a winning strategy for the consumer and for us.
Well, that's a nice summary. Slightly more than 2 words, but we'll let you have it. Jean-Denis, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
It's been
Thank you
an
to you.
absolute pleasure.